So the zines that I put together, it has a bunch of different things. A lot of it is zines that we made at the press in the library. So they are newspapers that we published. They're titled Sister Times. And then we have some sister zines which feature South Asian women that wrote in South Asian languages, also published in the library. And then we have a collection of some zines that are published by feminist presses across the in the UK. So we have some Chappers zines that are published by a group of friends, and they are all women as well. So it is their experiences. And then there is also a bunch of like directional zines that have like clearly laid out plans and ideas to disrupt, to organize, to form collectives. And of course, we cannot ignore what has been happening in the world right now. We are living in times of crisis and in times of war. So there are many zines that also talk about Palestine and the history. Um, yeah, and then there are also some zines that celebrate women activists, indigenous women, indigenous epistemologies. So yeah, loads of different things. But the central idea of it, just like the library, is to celebrate works of women. And oftentimes in zines, the ideas that don't find spaces in the mainstream discourses find a footing and an audience within the larger zine culture. So it is not just celebrating women, but celebrating women who are often not given spaces in the mainstream. So that's the plan. Idea is always for zines to be like achievable. Like, this medium in itself is something that you don't have to like you don't even need a computer to make it, because it's always been done with whatever material you have. And then it's also like it's very activist in nature. So there's often like zine makers who, I don't know if I should say this, but oftentimes zine makers go to other people's offices and then they just like photocopy using the photocopier in corporate offices and just make zines and a bunch of it so that we can just circulate. So that's something that people do a lot. But of course, there's a lot of thought and a lot of work that goes into making zines, even with the sister zines, because the idea has been to celebrate women who wrote in South Asian languages. So a lot of like South Asian writers that are men have been celebrated in the mainstream universally. So we've seen like people like Manto, for instance, who wrote in Urdu, has been translated in so many languages, has been given a lot of critical acclaim, which we don't see so much with women writers. So even with someone like Ismat Chugtai, whose work has been translated from Urdu to English, like when you read Ismat and when you read about her, and when I was doing the research for this zine, to realize that there were so many words that she actually introduced to the Urdu written word, because these were words only used by women, only used by Muslim women in the house. There was no written history of it. So just with her writing literature, it meant that these were words that women could relate to then, which made reading more accessible to women or exciting to women or more relatable to women. And these things are not noticed because like it's women's canon, right? Like, it's not like the general canon, but it is so much, because she's bringing into life these words that were not present at all. So just to give an example of Ismat, but because these things are not talked about, we miss out on so much of human history, like, not just on women's history. So yeah, a lot of work goes into it. But then like once you make it and then circulate it, it's not daunting like a hardcover book. It's just like, it feels like pages put together and stapled together, and you feel like, oh, if someone could make this about Ismat or Rokeya or Savitri Mai or like, all of these other authors, like Baby Tai Kamble, then I could make this about my grandmother or about my mom or something like that. So that's the idea of zine making, to inspire people to do.
And if I could add something to that, one of the great things about zine making, and exactly as you were saying, to put the work out there without having to cater to the norms of big publishing houses, it gives you greater autonomy over the stories you want to tell, over the authors or artists or activists or thinkers whose ideas that may not be entirely palatable to a mainstream press or a mainstream financier, and you can step around those obstacles, and that creates an environment of greater solidarity, I would say, within the feminist movement and beyond. And that's a huge, I would say, opportunity for all of us who are trying to tell stories and trying to uncover stories that historically have not been part of the grand narrative or the mainstream, because we're all trying to press against that construct.
Yeah, definitely. Like, not having censorship is like extremely important in all art form, I think. But then, like, we forget about all the editors, the publishing houses when it comes to fine art, then the the art market economy, and the ideas that it wants to represent. And then there is this pipeline from university to the gallery or like from the university to the publishing house pipeline. And then what happens then to the ideas that the publishing houses or the galleries or the museums do not want to represent at all? And especially in times of crisis, especially for people who are historically oppressed, especially for women. And yeah, these are very important questions. And I think like zine making becomes an extremely exciting opportunity, a very potent tool for people like us. But then again, like, with all things exciting and life-giving, appropriation is a huge problem. And then we have been seeing that within the zine making realm as well, which is why, like, even when I was talking to Katerina a few days back, like the emphasis on zines being physical is very, very important to me. And it's crucial that people can still touch it and feel it, because it does not really translate. Like, once you scan a zine and you see a picture of it, it becomes a very different object from the object that you can hold and touch and feel. So yeah, there's also that distance, like even with the content being so rich and dense, and inspiring, when it's in a zine form, it's very different than holding a book. So yeah, it's less intimidating, I would say, and more accessible. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the process of making and reproduction and distribution? Because again, coming from publishing, it's a completely like, even from an operational point of view as the library, the zines kind of like break everything that we're used to. We can't digitize, we can't really archive them because they're ephemeral. We have to make them accessible. They're fragile, but that's just part of the game. So if you can talk a little bit about the whole process and how we can maybe start our own little practices here.
Yeah. So like oftentimes I think it's like I keep going back to like this culture of appropriation. It's like, oftentimes when universities teach students, art students or design students to make zines, they forget about the other part of it, which is the distribution part of it. They just teach them how to make a zine. And I've been invited by many universities to hold these classes. But zine making is not just about making, it's also about distribution and then maintaining the ecosystem where the zine making can thrive. Because you can't just be making zines in your studio and then wait for someone else to do the distribution of it. So zine making encompasses all of this. Like, you make zines, you circulate zines, and then you build spaces where zine makers can feel all right as well, because zine making also carries a lot of like ideas or like distressing thought or like, you know, things that challenges the norm. And so it's also, you know, putting people into precarious positions and places, and you want to nurture these people, you know, you want to hold each other, you want to find community, especially because like zine making comes from a space of historically oppressed communities. And so it just can't be about the making. So I'm going to talk about like the making constitutes everything, is what I mean. Like, you know, it's not just making an object, it's making this entire ecosystem. So let me start with the making process. It has to be like every time I make a zine, I think about how I can make it as accessible and doable and as easy to do as possible. And this, I wouldn't say is true for all of my work, because I take the worst way possible to make any other work. Like I'll use an analog camera out of circulation film. Nobody can process it. Like, you know, I do all these things. You can see all of my negatives there. But when it comes to zine making, I try to do it as simple as possible. How can I do it as easily? Because you have to understand the thought is there, like which is like really, really heavy. It's dense, but I want to process it in a way. I want to put it out there in a way that's the easiest to do. So I use a photocopier or a printer. How can I bind it? Like, you know, is the easiest, simplest way possible. So center staple is something that I go with a lot, because anyone can do it. And usually I travel with like a long arm stapler to staple my zines, or sometimes I even make zines which are like just made with one paper, one A4 size paper or A3 size paper, and then I just like fold it together so that it does not even need stapling. Single color so that I can produce as much as possible, as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, so that I can give it out for free, or I can sell it for like 50 rupees or like 100 rupees, you know, depending on how much I'm traveling. So I want it to be as accessible as possible. The idea has always been that, or giving it for free is something that gives me a lot of joy. And with zine makers, we also have this like culture of swapping zines. So like we exchange our zines with people a lot. So you have to think about all of these things when you are producing a zine, because if you are making a zine which is like 30 euros for one, then if a zine maker comes to you and wants to exchange, you would not feel good about exchanging your zine for something that's like, you know, just a centerfold or a center staple zine. And so you have to think about, what are you making then? Like, why is your zine so expensive? Is it even a zine? If it's so expensive, if it's taking you more than two people to put it together, if it's taking more than two people, two hands, four hands, two pairs of hands to put it together, then I would say maybe it's not a zine, you know, because it requires so much more help. And I'm not trying to be ableist here, but like zine making has to be fairly simple. It has to be very simple to make. So this is just like the physical making part of it. The ideation, of course, it can take years. Sometimes I've known people who have thought of the same zine for 7 years, 10 years in a row, and then how they go back to the same zine and edit it and then like republish it and reprint it, or have like volumes of the same zine. So the research process, the writing process can take years. It can take any form. You can uh, there are no editors, so you are your own editor. So you can basically use found material. You can use a computer or a typewriter to type. You can also handwrite. You can use photographs. You can use any medium as long as you know you can print it. Making part. The second part of it is distribution, which is that now you've made a zine. So what do you do with it? You just go stand on the street and try to sell it, or like try to exchange it, or try to give it to people. And then you see so many people get excited with this. But I also understand, as a woman who has done this multiple times in multiple countries, that it is not it's extremely challenging. So you might want to have a friend with you, or you might want to go with another person who makes zines so that you have company. Or you can like ask your university or your place of work, or somewhere that you have more familiar people where you can show your work or circulate your work. The third thing that you can do is just write to libraries and tell them, I want to send my zine to you. And then hopefully people will be able to find your zine. If you are in a place like Bombay, I think sadly, like Bombay Zine Fest is the only Zine Fest that happens in South Asia. I know there's also another one, like the Gezi one, but it's a zine market. So no, I don't even know if they still do it. I'm not sure. But you can send your zines to Bombay Zine Fair, and or like to other zine fairs across the world, because the zine fair is a festival of zine making and independent publishing that happens all across the world, different places. There are some like very big zine fests that happen across the world, like just like LA Zine Fest, and then there is this thing called what is it, Expo Zine that happens in Montreal. Thousands of zine makers. Yeah, and then there are like tinier zine fests that happen everywhere as well, which becomes a very good place for you to meet other zine makers, exchange ideas, exchange zines. And then there are distros, which is a distribution center, which is specific to zines and independent music. And it's also like sometimes distros are info shops as well, which are like information centers. So it's mostly run by anarchists in these places called squats. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but like squats are just houses that are occupied by unhoused people. And so they are nice open spaces which challenge the ownership, the concept of ownership and housing in different countries. So yeah, there are some nice distros. There's one in Zurich called the Cassette, which is a nice distro which holds zines and independent music. Then there is another one called Synchronized, which is press in Manchester. You have a bunch of zines from them as well. There's another distro called Fluxus Chapel in Bombay. Then yeah, there are various distros across the world. And yeah, these distros are important because they are all independent. They don't run under state funding because of the nature of their work. And they are extremely active. There are loads of things happening in distros. You meet a bunch of different zine makers, artists, activists, musicians, people who you may not see in the mainstream art exhibitions and places like that, but who have been doing inspiring work, who have always done inspiring work, and who have given their life to building a counter culture. I don't like that word so much, but like it explains a lot. So yeah, what is our responsibility then, like as zine makers, to make sure that these spaces also exist? Because a distro wouldn't exist without us, but we wouldn't also exist without a distro. So like it's always about like holding community and space and nurturing each other. So it's like very symbiotic, and it's a relationship of care, because the distros usually don't take a large chunk of money from zine makers, because they understand that you basically made this zine for under $1. So for them to ask you like $1 for your zine will be a lot. So usually it's like all very friendly, full of nurturance. But also like there's this like understanding that we have with each other, that yeah, we care for each other, we want each other to exist. And this is not just in terms of monetarily caring for each other, but also standing by each other, because they also live in like difficult circumstances. So if there's like a distro in Berlin where the police wants to intervene because it's in a squat, then we go, like, you stand by them, like, yeah, we carry each other's burdens, and we then it also like really pushes the idea of like, what does it mean to shut a space that is like so culturally important, that has nurtured thousands of artists who are very celebrated in the mainstream as well. So yeah, these questions are very pertinent, because if it was a university, then would the police feel like going and shutting down a space like a university? So like, all of these things. Yeah. Don't know if it makes sense to you, but yeah, zine making is about all of this. It's not just about like sitting in a studio, making something and then giving it to your manager or your curator for them to do the distribution part of it. It makes you involved in life as a maker, as opposed to an artist whose work is just to be in the studio and make work and be totally detached and be the special person. No, the making involves that you step on the ground, you talk to other people, and you see how your idea that you have put out in the world is challenged, how you're pushed, then how your idea can take new shape and flow into different directions, and how you connect with other people. And so, like, it's basically just ideas, then it shapes you and it shapes other people, and that's the beauty of making.
Thank you, Aki. A lot of the zines that you've sent us are anonymous, and some of them are signed, and some of them have email addresses that welcome feedback or connection. I wonder if you have channels of feedback, and if you've received letters in response to your zines, because you have quite a big collection of your own.
Yeah, I have. I have, like, the immediate feedback is from the police when you're doing things on the street. I've been chased by police in so many different countries. But
Feedback with a capital
F. Yeah, there is also like some like negative feedback, I would say, from people who just think that we are disrupting the flow of every day by just being on the streets. But then there's like a lot of love and positive feedback from people who write to me, and then who are just so happy to receive a zine, or someone gave it to them, or they came across it in a library somewhere, and or they came across it in the sister library. So yeah, loads of love, and like how they started thinking differently about a certain thing. Even like simple things, like there's this one zine, I don't know if you have that in your collection, but then it's titled Eating Like My Bojo. So it's basically about oranges, and I made the zine. I was like an A4 fold out zine. And it's basically 8 pages of talking about how oranges are indigenous to Himalayas because because I love oranges, and then I'm indigenous to the Himalayas. So I just felt very connected to oranges, and then I made the zine, and then I thought about how my grandmother Buju would eat oranges. And so, but Buju is also like a mother, like, a grandmother, the creator of the universe and sustainer of all life forms for us indigenous Kiratama people. So yeah, it was just like looking at that, and it's very simple, but even a simple zine like that, I have received so many messages from people saying, "Oh, thank you for making this. Like, it really touched my heart." And it's just about like when you eat an orange, like, I want you to really think about what the orange is, and I want you to give thanks. So it's just that, like, I just want you to look at the majesty of that orange, like how beautiful it is, like the skin, the scent of it, like, the taste and the flavor, just that. But yeah, it's got so much love, and yeah, I think it's like one of the nicest, easiest space for people to react to, as opposed to like other works that I make, which are also like very heavy because I work with a lot of like post interventions, film, and ceremony. And sometimes when people see these works, they don't know what to say. They're just like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what to say. But with zines, they are immediately like, oh, I love this, or like, I feel this way about this, and then they interact more readily and in person. But yeah, definitely, I've got like loads of emails, loads of Instagram messages. It feels nice.
I ask because so much of your work has to do with people and interaction, and and I think that's something that we as a library here with these zines, we have to work more on creating that space for people to come and interact in person. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how the Sister Library works and how it's just like it's a space, but it's also not a space. It's a collective, but it's also like very broad. And you for instance, you came here, you gave us the idea, and you kind of let it grow, and now you come back to it. So I would love to hear more about like your practice working with people and your artworks that involve engagement and interaction.
Yeah, I think like for me, art was always like more participatory than like studio practice because I never went to an art school, which is funny because now I teach in different art schools. But yeah, I never had like a formal art education. So for me, like art making always was like doing with people, like, doing together and like experiencing things together. And so I think as an extension of that, like Sister Library became this space where we do things together, but it also like really, really pushes the idea of like, oh, what does a community space mean? And what does ownership mean again? Because then what does a feminist library mean if it is owned by a business or like, a corporation or like the government? So because these are all like anti-feminist spaces, right? Like on paper, like in theory, let's say. So yeah, it was very crucial for me to then build a space that counters or challenges these ideas and to see how it can exist without having to live within these discourses or realms. So yeah, it's I don't know. I don't even have the words for it, but like it amazes me every day because how have we survived? Because it is literally a parallel universe and it's doing so great. Like, every year we grew from a library that I would travel with across to different cities to having a physical space that we have running for 8 years now. And then we have a press, we have a radio, now we have a residency program. So it's I couldn't even have dreamt of something so big, but the fact that it's growing, it's thriving. We've had like so many wonderful women, great volunteers who have associated with it, who do so much work along with me. It's just fascinating. And none of us are paid. Like we have had no paid staff except for like a few sisters from Dharavi who needed a job because their houses were falling apart and we thought like, yeah, we can support you as a staff, but that has been, I think, just for like most 6 months, like just for them to find their feet back again so that they can get back into the workflow because they're single mothers. So yeah, we and not just running the library, we've been able to support women in crisis situations because we have the space. So, like every year, every monsoon, we collect uh, sanitary products, uh, what is it, menstrual products for and underwear for women and girls in flood affected regions in India, and we send those to them because they are always in need of more because if your houses are flooded and you are being taken to a relief center, then you don't always get like desirable menstrual hygiene products. So, your life is already going, like you're going through a lot when you are living in a relief camp. And we don't want this to be another problem that you have to encounter. So every year we've been able to do that. We've been able to support women and children and like people in relief camps in crisis regions like Manipur, where there's been like a lot of civil disharmony or like conflict. We've been able to support women in crisis situations during COVID, where we raised funds for working women in Dharavi. We also supported women in tea plantations who were not getting paid from March up until November, but they had to keep their houses running. We've been able to start a scholarship program for girls to support them from school through university. All of this has just been possible because we have this space, which is incredible. And yeah, it's and it's all volunteer run. Everything is just, it just happens. And yeah, I'm grateful for the support and love, but there is no planning. Like a lot of times people have come to me and they've asked me like, how do you plan? How do you um think about, there isn't like, of course, like I put my ideas in paper, like for sister residency, I'd made this like whole solid plan about like, this is the money I need, this is what's going to happen. And I write about why this is important. And then it happens, like, I put it out there, and I sometimes I don't even have time to think, like, because with the conflict in Manipur, I just like I couldn't live with the thought that there were over 10,000 children who were found without their parents because they were hiding from the conflict. And I just like, it was so painful. So I was immediately like, I reached out to the feminists on the ground and I asked them like, what can I do? And then they were like, yeah, we need, there's been so many, what do you call it? Like when you lose your baby, miscarriages. Okay, there've been so many miscarriages because of the fear. And so they wanted a lot of, again, like menstrual hygiene, but then they also, it was cold because it was raining and the relief camps were not made properly. They wanted blankets. So yeah, we did not have time to plan. We immediately got into action and then started. I could not even, usually like we have like materials come to the library where we look at every little thing, we pack every little thing so that like, it's in good condition. Because like, the thing with like, and I would say that it is the South Asian thing. I don't know why it is, but every time you feel like you're giving something to people, you want to give the worst quality possible. I don't understand why. So we have to do a quality check every time, but this time we did not have time. So like I immediately told people to like send it to the relief camp so that it does not have to come to the library for us to do like a quality check and then send it through to Manipur. So yeah, it just happens. Things happen. And I've been able to do this thanks to like the incredible team of volunteers, I think, who also recognize and see that it's important for us to do this. So yeah, it's not just about celebrating women and about celebrating women's creativity, women's art, but also about, yeah, holding each other's hands and like, being supportive to each other. Because I mean, like, how would I can't think of a library in Bombay that would not react to these crisis situations where other women are just suffering and we are just happy to sit in a circle and read a book. That's not how it works, especially if the book that you're reading about is talking about women in crisis situations. So yeah, it's become imperative for us. And I think basically if you go back to like feminist theory, then you realize that yeah, the theory emerged from action. It was not the other way around. It was not like a theory that became an action later. So yeah. I know it does not answer your question, but it is just how it is.
I'll pass it to Nazia. Thank you, Aki. It did. It did.
It really did. It really answered the question about how the Sister Library is working in building these communities, and how it's not, as you said, purely theoretical. In fact, the theoretical part of working together as a group of women that read together is only part of what Sister Library does. Ultimately, it is more about action. It's more about taking control of situations that historically and even in the contemporary moment continue to marginalize women and endanger them and put them in situations of crisis where they have little control over their lives, their bodies, as you were mentioning in Manipur. And in those circumstances, it's our responsibility as readers, thinkers, as members of this library, or even as somebody who's interested in feminist history, as somebody who's interested in women's literature, it's our responsibility to not just talk about it, but also to get on the ground and be a part of it. So absolutely, I think that answers the question brilliantly. I guess I would be curious to know how you envision Bangladesh and the context of Bangladesh playing a part as we embark on this zine making workshops and talks and discussions that Daily Star Books and the Goethe Institute and Sister Library are doing in collaboration over the next few months. We have some thoughts, Katerina and I and Shoma, we have discussed how we want this to be about Bangladesh, about Bangladeshi identity, about uniquely Bangladeshi challenges that our women and girls encounter on a daily basis. Something you mentioned about the oranges, about your grandmother, I immediately thought of an object. And the object I thought of is something that's used in the kitchen. It's, we call it shilpata, where you mash your masala and your vegetables. It's a slab that's on the ground and there's another slab on top of it. And usually it's women who sit down and mash their ingredients together and then prepare it, and then they do the cooking. There are so many iterations of kitchen utensils, and there are so many versions of food-centric objects that are lying around in our domestic spaces that are unique to women. And what's even more fascinating, in Bangla language and in Bangla discourse, when we think about violence against women, those same utensils are used as curse words to talk about women, such as a common curse word would be, a woman must be pasted on that slab so that she remains under control. You understand what I'm saying? So I immediately thought that I would love to create a zine in talking about these utensils, these objects that we see lying around that have historically restricted women's presence to the kitchen, minimize the labor that she performs in the kitchen, and then delimits her potential to do anything else, finally belittles her for being the person who works in the kitchen. So to me, this is a really uniquely South Asian, but also very particularly Bangladeshi part of telling a story, a simple story that takes place in households across social class, I would say. Again, with caveat, I wouldn't say that it happens across social class in exactly the same way, but some lingering effects of it do present themselves across social class. That's my broad question to ask you. How would we intervene into the Bangladeshi feminine space through zine making and to make it contextualized for us? Do you have thoughts about that? Because I know we have potential zine makers in the making here today, and I would love to take this to my class, and I would love to talk to younger audience members eventually. So, thoughts?
Yeah, I think like the best thing about zine making is that you don't have to give directions. So it's very open. And I think it'll be nice to have that openness about it too. If you don't have like a theme or an idea, or even if you do, it could be just like very open, like Bangladeshi women, for instance, and how different women interact with the same theme, and then what do they produce. And it could be like a collective zine, like you could do a call for like write or draw or like do something around Bangladeshi women. and then you can have like open to all ages, and then you can see how women and girls think of this idea and then like produce work and you can put it together. Or you can have it like very niche and you can talk about like, let's talk about women's history of survivance. And like, I'm fascinated with the idea of like, or the history of, how do you say it? I forget the word. Katrina, help me. The Viranganas. Is that right?
Viranganas, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1971 Viranganas, yes.
Yeah, so I think like it is such an important aspect of like female survivance, and like it's so rich. And I think a lot of like the current uh, women's ideas around the country and the nation state might be shaped by what these women had to go through. And so I think that would also be something that I would be invested in looking at, because it's not very widely available and it's something that women don't want to talk about. But then again, like zine making is a medium where you talk about difficult things and where you ask difficult questions. So sometimes it's like a funny old zine, but like a lot of times it's also about like, yeah, what is this thing? Like, let's disrupt it. So I think to have that openness is very important. Sometimes it's like challenging a lot of like legality and like even looking at law and what it means to women. Like you can see in the collection that I've sent. But like what would be good is that if you took like, we have 100 zines, and then if you took one zine every month, and then like, or maybe a little longer than a month, I don't know how comfortable you are, and then like try to think about a zine that you could make. So yeah, I think that the zine that you're looking at could be an entry into what would be your reflection on the social context that you live in, and then produce a body of work and then put it together. Or sometimes you could even do a workshop, and then like so there is like the zine that I've made, it's called Biryani with Love, and it came from this work that I did where I invited people to come and eat biryani from different places when I was in London. And so it could be something like that as well. Like, you could invite people for a potluck or something, invite women from different places, different socioeconomic groups, ask them to bring a food that they like, and then just, even if they can't write, a lot of times women from lower socioeconomic backgrounds cannot write because they're never sent to school. But then you can have volunteers who can write down their recipe and then like produce it in the form of a zine. So yeah, I think because you have all of these zines, there's so many things that you could do. Of course, working with the idea that you have is great as well, but I keep suggesting people to keep it open so that yeah, then this idea of like editorial or censorship does not come into being at all. Like, there has to be a lot of freedom that goes into it. Or you can also do like zine making workshops. I did one when I came with the library to Dhaka as well, and I think Katerina was also participating in it. So was Shoma. So if you go back to it, then you will know that I was never like make it like this. I was just like, do whatever you want to do. And those are fun times also. Like it really starts making people feel comfortable with the idea of print. So you can do a couple of those, and then maybe once then people start making zines, more women get invested with the idea of zine making, the format of it, then you can ask them to like, think about this particular idea, or if they would want to, or you could do open calls as well. But I don't know how that works because I have not done something like that. But yeah, I think like collectively making, I'd still go with collectively making. It sounds more simpler and doable.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing. Collectively coming together, wanting to do what we want to do. When I work with the students and when we do creative projects, talking about linguistic oppression. This is something that I'm fascinated by, even though I am not a linguist, but of course I work with literature and it's all about language. And when we do analysis of linguistic oppression in textbooks, we sometimes bring it back to the real world. Like, how do you think that your language sometimes oppresses you? And the Birangana narrative is a huge part of that conversation. I know Nari Pakho, which is one of the leading feminist groups, working groups in Bangladesh, they are actively trying to change the discourse around what it means to be a woman who has raped, what it means to be a woman who works in prostitution. So instead of using words that limit her to her job or to a sexual assault or violence that she has faced, we try to decenter the atrocity from that discourse. And so when we bring that conversation into the classroom, I remember students almost always bring up how regularly they face harassment in public transport, whether it's a physical assault and also just unpleasant things being told to them as they're trying to move from point A to point B, daily harassment because of clothes, because of being women, because of just existing in a space that has historically been male. And so the entry of women and the occupation of women of that space is threatening or awful to that masculinized ideal of propriety and as well as modesty. And I know that I bring this up because I was thinking how interesting it would be to write about that convergence of linguistic discourse as well as physical violence that takes place in the public space. Like those, I think, would be things that young women would be very interested in. Just something I'm thinking because I've had many conversations with young women about that. But you're absolutely right. I think the idea should be to let it be free. Let us all come together and see what ideas take us on. And we take that idea on and try to see where we go with it, to be as open as possible.
Yeah. And I think like you're right. Like there are some discourses that I think are very important to put together, like, accessibility to streets and like public spaces is something that is also very close to my heart. I have this whole body of work called A Woman Was Harassed Here.
Oh, wow.
This big poster. It's
I
like
do
a poster
research on this,
intervention.
so yeah, for me as well.
Yeah, so I think like these are things that women can talk about, but then also like then what do you do? Like, you put it together, then you have to go to public spaces, share it with people, and talk to men. Or like, you can also do like a very research-based thing. Like you can go and interview men and you can ask them, like, have you harassed someone? Do you think when you're staring at someone, if that constitutes harassment? Or like, when you pass a comment or when you sing a song looking at a woman, have you stalked someone? Have you walked behind someone? And things like this. And then you can be like, okay, we collected data on like, 300 men in this given train station in Dhaka, and these were the responses. And then you can ask women to react to the data. You can just be like, so what do you think? And then like, that evening could just be like women reacting in the forms of drawings or like pictures in their phones. Yeah. Or like you can have a bunch of magazines that they can cut out from, and then you can make a zine out of it. And and then like you can show that zine in an exhibition and invite men to come and talk of and be like, what do you think?
Now what do you think?
Yeah.
I love that. I wonder, do we have any other specific questions we wanted to ask Aqui, Katerina? Because
I think I would like the audience to have a moment.
Yeah,
we only have half an hour,
so
and there's a reading at the end, so I think we have like 15 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, everyone.
I have a question. How are
hi,
you?
Nazia.
Where are you, Aqui? I have a whole lot of oil on my hair, but I can still open my video. I think it's
Please.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm sorry I joined late, but I could not miss it. I didn't want it to miss it. I'm sorry.
A
Yeah.
reunion party.
Super nice to see
How
you.
are
And I
you?
have to tell it out loud that Aki is one of the first person to make me interested in zines, literally.
Oh,
Yeah. So, I mean, I owe this to you.
where are you?
I'm in Germany now. Where are
You have to
you?
come and see me. I'm in the Netherlands. But
Yay!
I'm
Oh my God. Yes.
But wait, I have an exhibition on the 1st in Berlin. Come, I'll send you the details. Do you have the
Okay, we
same
put all
WhatsApp?
this in the WhatsApp chat. Okay, we are in a
Yeah.
professional
Send
space
me a
of
message.
our
Send me a
stories.
message.
Yeah, definitely. So that's gonna happen. Maybe we extend this planning, Katerina, in Europe also, a zine making something. I would love to do that. And especially in
Wonderful.
Bangladesh, you know, the perspective about zine is still not opened up, literally, because it's true that you inspired, and then I have met only, I think, two more people that I know who are not from Bangladesh, actually, but working around zine. And if I compare their ways of looking into zine, the activism was put together in a very hard way. Sometimes I would feel, you know, that the natural organic processes that you try to design in zine making. You know, let's talk about our favorite food, biryani, or it can be something else. So the practice, the love that you want to, you know, build around zine making, and eventually it creates a freedom of your speech through your work, you know, the self-publishing thing about it, that what you emphasize. But in other zine making process, I would see they make it look again super hard. The main problem that is existing in the art scenario sometimes, that, you know, artists make the art look so, you know, to make it look so special, they make it hard to connect with audience, and then, you know, there's this
Yeah.
gap happens. That
Yeah.
is not in your arena of zine making, and that's what I love. And I think we really need a lot more things happening around zine in Bangladesh, and make the love about this self-publishing idea, you know, the freedom that it
Mhm.
gives. We tried something in Rajshahi. Catherine also visited. Everywhere I do something, I think I want to make a pocket for this kind of zine making, which is kind of taking a very good shape in Russia here. I think the young people from the project have grown real interest in this. So yeah, I'm looking forward for more and looking forward to meet you.
Yay.
I'm super
Yeah.
happy to
Write
see
to
you.
me. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. All right, I sign off now and let others talk.
Yeah, I'll talk. Thank you so much. That was really fascinating and insightful. Like, I really liked what you said about things growing out of a action-oriented mindset. It's something that really appeals to me, that way of thinking. Although I do have a studio space, but I still spend most of my time connecting with people online and like thinking things through and thinking through actions and creating for actions. That's really the primary basis for most of my work right now. Like, even what I'm embroidering right now is going to be for my final chance after many months of waiting, being able to go on demonstrations and marches, because this has been like eating me up inside. So if you want to see, it's like what I'm going to work on the plane on the journey to England. But like,
Nice.
it's not quiet work, but it's inside a quiet space. But I feel that in Bangladesh, like, for me, I don't know, maybe you guys have better insight, or Katerina, that I do feel that constraint that I don't have in England, that I'm used to those kind of art activist spaces in Manchester, where I grew up, and I'm unfamiliar with them in Bangladesh. And I could see that you were opening that out. And like, for example, I did actually basically I was putting together a zine the other day in response, like a kind of as a responsive dialogue with Katerina. I didn't share it with you yet, but like, this was kind of around an it was like around an interaction that I'd had with an Israeli bookbinder, and this kind of it was like a glass houses concept. But like, I could share that through your platform, right? Like, and that's, as you're saying, like, what is the work of the distribution? Like, should I confront the, like, what I feel like is a relatively alien concept and just force people to become familiar with it, which is something that I am interested in doing, like getting people to engage in this style of working. Like, I'm in a world around the humanitarian sector and they don't have the spaces like I have, even though they're from all over the world and they might be familiar, but in Bangladesh they don't have that. So like because like one of the things with zines, it seems like, is like the mobility of it, right? Like, what do you think of things where it's like it has to be necessarily like a static zine? Is that like a contradiction in terms? Because I was thinking of using like the walls of my studio as kind of being that place of like outpouring, like literally like how people write on prison cells, you know, where it's like you don't have space to share it and you don't have space to tell it. Only if someone enters into your space and enters into your isolation, then they're willing to engage in that, you know, that inner thought that you haven't been able to release and you haven't been able to distribute. So it's kind of like a tension between that. Do you force it through into spaces where they were not ready to receive it, or do you just like lure them in and then confront them, which is what I'm doing?
Yeah, I think they are like two very different languages, like of writing on the walls, which is also something that I work with because I do graffiti and I do like a lot of street art and intervention, which I like to work on street. Like what you're talking about is something very different. Like you want to write in personal spaces. So these are very different languages, different animals, let's just say. So you'd be comparing a bird to a frog or something like that. Like the zine, it is mobile, like, you know, it has to touch many hands. And I think now more than ever, where like everything that we're surrounded by, it feels like bubbles, like we're so insular, you know, like we see our thoughts reflected with everyone that we surround ourselves with. And I think it becomes important then to make a zine, connect with people who think differently, and see how then this interaction shapes you. Because this is what happens to women all the time. You know, you step out of your house, you're already challenging hundreds and thousands of ideas and history, and you're challenging, like, I don't know, honor, which just lives in your body. So I think an idea, as in the form of zine, it has to travel, it has to touch hands, it has to touch people. And sometimes that could also mean that you're putting yourself at risk because people don't like it. And it has happened to me many times in Bombay and in other places where people, when they're confronted with an idea that they do not like, I think it was a zine about consent. I don't recall which zine exactly, but there was a group of men who did not like it. So they surrounded me in the street and then they started showing me pictures in the zine and they wanted me to describe the pictures to them. And it became incredibly hard for me to just stand there because then they were like closing in. But thankfully, I was with another zine maker who came and he was just like, "What are you guys doing?" So I think being a zine maker, you also have to allow yourself that space to be brave because then again, like as women, we are taught, especially as South Asian women, we are taught to not cross our boundaries and like, you know, not do things that will upset people.
Okay.
Did she have a question? Yeah, so just I think that okay, go on.
No, just yeah. I mean, do you find it very different to distribute in an urban compared to a rural or like these different spaces? Do you do things in a different way or kind of?
Yeah, I think like sometimes when I'm working in rural spaces, I also look at what are the small presses that are at work because we come to zine making from a very Western understanding, but we'll have to remember that South Asia has a really solid history of independent publishing and distribution. They've always been small presses, they've always been smaller publishing houses anywhere we go, even like really, really remote places, because we have a very long history of written word. And so it's exciting for me to then go to these small presses and be like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you making? And it has always been something that a man has made that is being circulated, or a religious text or something like that. And then for me to then see like what kind of markets do they have. They usually have like a village weekly market where they sell their wares. And the one thing to think about when you're looking at rural contexts is also that it has to be fairly cheaper than you'd make your zine in urban spaces, because in urban spaces people have more disposable incomes, and they also earn higher, so you can sell your zine for like 100 rupees, but it's not the same when it comes to rural spaces, because they hardly have any money. So that definitely like a huge difference between urban spaces and rural spaces in terms of distribution, but also how open to ideas people are too, I think. Sometimes they don't want to engage because they don't have time, but I think like especially in India, especially with the Ambedkarite movement, which is like the Dalit rights movement, because of the emphasis on the written word and on education, there are so many people in rural India who actually like to read, especially like Ambedkarite books. So that's been the space that I usually go to. But then again, like I think about my place as well as an artist, as a maker, and as someone who has the privilege of making a lot. And then what does it mean to bring this idea to a space which is not mine? Yeah, so I think about all of these things because yeah, intellectual colonization is like a very real thing. And I like to confront those ideas when I'm trying to share my work. But also, then again, as an indigenous person, we also have like a very rich oral history. And then I try to engage with the orality and the aspect of orality in another work of mine. Not everything that we do has to be for everyone and for every context. That's also something that's important to consider. And then how do you use these different mediums and ways of working and expressing, like you're embroidering something. You could not do this while standing in a moving train or something in a place like Bombay. This requires you to be in a space where you can have your hands and your surroundings open so that you can move your hand and your needle without injuring anyone. So yeah, different languages, different spaces. I think we should all be allowed to do that. Zine making requires a few set of different things, but excited also to see how it shapes in different spaces in Bangladesh, not just in Dhaka, but even amongst rural spaces. I think also for Katerina, going with the independent presses and small presses, publishing houses in rural Bangladesh should be exciting to look at.
Very. Would you like to read?
Okay. All right. I am going to read this zine. It's called Boju. I'm actually making another zine called Baje, which is for my grandfather. But okay. Boju is noun informal, one's grandmother, a mother figure deity, a central figure of many indigenous groups where maintenance of fertility is of prime importance. This book is inspired by history, but not limited by it. I wanted to show in words and drawings what Boju would want to say to her children from the lands of slaughtered libraries. My Boju told me. And then there's a drawing. When you were born, you touched the very heart of my loneliness. You are a promise of happiness, the healing. And there's another drawing. You, the scar, raw throbbing, you wear on your mouth, the crown of Kanchenjunga, a cup of organic tea, a clown in military uniform, revolution, an empty can of tear gas, broken guitar strings, you, Darjeeling. And then another drawing. My daughters, made with my flesh, with my blood, are prisoners in the red-walled rooms of your cities. This is not ignorance. This is not anomaly. This is war, the hurt. I am new. History made me. The language of my Churpi and Tongba I speak with my hands. The secret. Churpi is a kind of mountain cheese, and Tongba is millet-based alcoholic drink. And another drawing. When the blood of our prophets, this slate colored my soil, I whispered an iceberg inside them. They are never warm. Revenge. I made you like me, a sonnet of war. I made you from my body so that you remember everything. True love. And another drawing. I gave you your small eyes so that you wouldn't have to squint very hard at people who don't understand the music in your voice. Ignorance. Don't let them take the forest. That is where I have left you prayers on every leaf of every pine. Burglary. And you are the soldier as well as the battlefield. Ism. And the last one. Forever it will protect you and destroy the others. The truth. Yay! This is the third edition. So I think now we have do you have the fourth edition, Katerina?
I have the first edition. Whoa.
All these. I think we have, yeah, you have the one in black and white. Yeah, that's the first
Yeah.
edition. Okay, old one. Yeah, so now I think we have the fourth edition. So there are 2,000 of this out there in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Well,
You're
you know,
welcome.
something you said in the interview that it's supposed to be inspiring and not intimidating. And I mean, and Zina, thank you for bringing up the question of rural urban. And I hope you and Cox's set up your own ways of making and also distributing. And even if it's anonymous, I think like the impact that somebody can have. Just like I gave a chapes to a girl the other day, and I didn't think I was traveling with it. And she didn't have anything to read. She'd never met a zine before in her life, and she asked to keep it. She said, "I can give it back to you in the evening." I said, "For sure." And she came back to me and she said, "You know, it's so inspiring. It made me want to make and also to confront like my negative sides because I'm so like, you got to be positive. You got to be positive. You got to be positive." And you never know what it will spark. And like when I got the package, actually Zinat was with me the night that I opened it, and like the different parts of the collection resonated different for her. I started making kombucha following the DIY kombucha zine. It was just like yeah, it was the best night. It was the best night.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, that's how it's meant to be. I think like the best thing to do with like rural spaces, which I also have done before, is that making together is the best answer because I feel a lot of feelings when it comes to like, why is my idea important? Like, why should people here look at what I think? Like, I have no right. And then I'm just like, let's make something together. And then that becomes so much more fruitful and more exciting to me.
Yeah.
And then also then it teaches women like how easy it is to do it, you know. They can also just go to a printer and then get it done there, which feels incredibly hard otherwise. Like when you are in a village where you've never done something like this, printing seems like a skill that you'll have to develop for years. Yeah, just do something together. I think that'll be the best thing to do.
True,
Okay, I
true.
think we've been over an hour.
Oh, we have to stop. Okay, but we can keep making and yeah. keep it going.
Yeah, and I'm happy to like come and, we can do a zine festival of some sorts, and like, Sister Library Zine Fest or something, which is only for women, and like women can table and sell their stuff, and I can get zines from different places that we can sell as well. So I think it'll be nice. It can be like it
Yeah.
does not have to be like 100 zine makers, but
Let's do it in November when you come.
Fun.
yeah, let's think about it. We talk more.
Nazia already has an idea about stopping the train. Zinat's already making one. Nadia is going to make a bunch of her class. And let me know what you want me to bring from Ukraine. I'll bring a bunch from Kiev and yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Sounds good.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, sisters.
So much.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome. Bye. Where's Shoma? Bye, Shoma. See you later. Bye.